Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 28 of Days Gone By, the review series for the classic and vintage car lineup of Gran Turismo 6 generally speaking, with some exceptions from older Gran Turismo games. Now, this particular pick is not a high performance vehicle, and some of the other cars which we'll be reviewing in this series are also not high-performance vehicles. They're just classic cars which are a little bit different, maybe a little bit oddball or quirky, or just unique, stuff which makes a good collector's piece, or perhaps just a point of interest to people who like cars that are different. Now, this particular model is essentially the Japanese Fiat 500. It's the Subaru 360. It's possibly my favourite Subaru in the entire game, and it's a really fun little car. It's basically the automotive equivalent of driving an Acorn. It's a tiny, tiny little car. I think personally it looks way better than the Fiat 500, but that's just me of course. And fully tuned, it actually doesn't have bad specs at all. Now, straight off the bat, this is a cheap car. Especially for a classic. 36 grand is really cheap for what could potentially be a pretty cool collector's piece. Now, what you get for that 36 grand is, as you'd expect, a pretty small engine. In fact, the 360, which is of course the name of the car, is referring to the engine size in cc or cubic centimeters. The engine is just under 360, 356 to be exact, and that tiny engine can actually be tuned to some pretty decent power. That really is a tiny engine. It's one of the smallest engines in the entire game, and that engine can put out 92 horsepower, fully tuned. Now that doesn't sound like much, and compared to many of the other cars in this series, it's not that much. In some cases, that may be literally 10 times less than some of the other cars featured, or even more in some cases. But for a 360cc engine, that's a pretty huge amount of power. Now, K cars can produce that kind of power with relatively minimal tuning, but if you think about it, those cars are roughly double the capacity, and at that level, double is a huge difference. Double, of course, is the difference between an average small hatchback and a hot hatch. Look at the difference that makes. Likewise with this vehicle, the fact that it's only half, roughly, the size of a K car in terms of engine capacity means that it's potentially starting with a huge disadvantage over many other cars. But 92 horsepower is not bad at all for this car's engine. The torque is also actually really impressive. 89 foot-pounds is pretty thumpy for this car's engine. Now, you'd expect this car to be light, and you'd be right, but you may not expect it to be as light as it actually is. Looking at this car, you might expect it to be somewhere around 5, maybe 600 kilos, but probably far less. Well, it does weigh far less. With the full weight loss package, it weighs 348 kilos. That's roughly the same kind of weight as the Caterham. This is an ultra lightweight car. And the fact that it is so light means that even though it's only working with 92 horsepower, fully tuned, you're looking at 264 horsepower per tonne. And that's not bad at all for such a tiny, thumpy little vehicle. Now, as far as PP, it is unfortunately very high for what it is. And that's not surprising, given how ultra lightweight it is. Generally, really small lightweight cars do have PPs that are just way too high, basically, and that is the case with this vehicle. Fully tuned, you're looking at 467 pp, which isn't as ridiculous as some others, but let's face it, that is too high for a 92 horsepower car, especially when, even with longer gears, you're only looking at around 130, 140 miles per hour flat out, and that's with a long straight. So, a speed machine, not really. It's not really a speed machine, but what it does have is the exact kind of stuff that you'd expect it to have. Good handling and good drivability. The fact that it's so small and light means that you can take corners at insane absolutely insane speeds. Now this is a rear engine, rear wheel drive car, so the front end is light, and that really benefits it on tracks such as here at the Nürburgring. Now overall, the lack of top end speed does hurt it on tracks like the Nürburgring, because you do need top end performance occasionally on tracks like this. If however you use it on a track where there's little if any room for top end performance, such as Laguna Seca or Ascari, or a perfect example would be a city track like London, even the GT Arena for instance, tracks like that this car is superb for, because you never get up to your top speed anyway, and you can absolutely fly around corners. Sometimes you can even take a corner with your foot to the floor in this car that you wouldn't be able to do anywhere near that in a much more powerful vehicle. Now, will it beat more powerful vehicles left, right and centre? Well, no, of course not. It's a 360cc classic city runabout. It's not a supercar, but it makes such a fun collector's piece that for 36 grand, it's not exactly a lot to pay out. And if you do have the time and inclination, I would recommend giving this car a shot, because you won't necessarily use it for racing that much, but you will find it fun. And this is the kind of car that if you do enjoy racing online in cruises or drive meetups or just for fun, it's the perfect kind of car to pull out. It's a great conversation starter, and it's incredibly fun to drive. So overall, I would highly recommend this car purely from a fun point of view, and understandably, and probably not surprising to many if any people, not so much for racing. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.